Have you ever been politely erased from your own family? I'm Marlene Grove, and the day my daughter-in-law threw a baby shower and didn't invite me, I thought it was just a small slight. I left the gift at the door and smiled like it didn't sting. But that was only the beginning. What came next? Well, it changed everything. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this, and where are you? Drop a comment below, I'd love to hear from you. I still remember how cold it was that morning, the kind of chill that only lingers in Scranton when spring is technically here but winter hasn't quite let go. The sun was out, sure, but the wind had that sharp bite to it, the kind that sneaks down the collar of your coat no matter how tight you zip it. It was a Saturday. The baby shower was that day. Shelby's baby shower. My daughter-in-law. And no, I hadn't been invited. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't going to stay. I just wanted to drop off the gift I had wrapped the night before, a hand-knit baby blanket and a book I used to read to my son when he was little. I tied it all up in soft tissue and a pale yellow bow. Quiet, sweet. Nothing fancy. I wasn't trying to make a scene. Ashwood Lofts wasn't far from my house, but it always felt like a different world. New buildings, valet trash pickup, electric car stations. Everything sleek, minimal, like feelings weren't welcome there. I parked a block away, not because there was no space, but because I didn't want to risk anyone seeing me too closely. I walked up the steps, the gift tucked under my arm, and heard it before I even reached the door. Laughter. Dozens of voices. Music, the soft clink of glasses, a burst of shrieking joy, probably from some gender reveal game or whatever else they do at those things now. I stopped on the welcome mat. I could see the decorations through the window. White and gold balloons, fancy signage in curly font. A little wooden plaque that read Mama's Golden Hour. It looked like a spread from a magazine. I didn't belong in that picture. I adjusted the gift in my hands and took one step back, ready to turn around and go home. That's when the door opened. A girl, young, maybe early 20s, peeked out, startled to find me standing there. She looked familiar in a vague way, probably a cousin or coworker of Shelby's. She blinked, smiled uncertainly. Oh, hi. You must be Shelby's mother-in-law. I nodded. Her smile wavered. Shelby said it was kind of a girls-only thing today, like, no moms or aunts or, you know. But I'm sure she wouldn't mind if you came in. I mean, you brought a gift, right? She reached for the bag automatically, probably to take it from me. I handed it over, careful not to let our fingers touch. She looked relieved. She'll love this, she added quickly, like that would fix everything. I smiled. The kind of smile you practice in the mirror so it doesn't shake. Tell her I stopped by. I turned around and walked back to my car. It wasn't until I was halfway down the street that I let myself breathe. And even then, it was shallow, tight in my chest like I had swallowed something that didn't quite sit right. On the way home, I told myself over and over again, it's fine. It's not about me. This is just how things are now. Shelby's young, she has her friends, she wants something different. I tried to make peace with it, to push away the sting. But the truth was, this wasn't the first time. It was just the most obvious. I thought about when I first offered to help pick names, how Shelby rolled her eyes and said, we're looking for something a little less mid-century. Then there was the time I brought over some baby books I had kept from when Jonah was little, and she laughed, saying, yeah, we're gonna do things a little more Montessori and a little less TV and canned spaghetti. That one stayed with me. She hadn't even opened the bag. And Jonah, he always looked so uncomfortable. Like he was stuck in the middle but too afraid to shift his weight. Every time I brought up how I felt left out, he'd mumble something about how everyone has different expectations now, and let's just give it time. But time wasn't changing anything. It was only stretching the silence. When I got back home, the house felt colder than it had that morning. I walked into the living room and saw the half-finished blanket lying on the arm of the couch. The yarn trailed down like a question I didn't want to answer. I picked it up, ran my hand over the soft knit, then set it down again. I sat there for a while, staring at it. All that effort, all that love. And somehow, I was still standing on the porch, looking in. I used to think that if I gave enough, if I was generous enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, I'd be included. I'd be loved, maybe not in big shiny words, but in the quiet, dependable way I had loved my son his whole life. But that day made something shift. Because I realized love that only works one way isn't really love at all. After the baby shower, I tried not to make a fuss. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I didn't even bring it up with Jonah. What would I say, really? That I stood on a doormat and overheard my own exclusion? That my gift was accepted with pity and I was waved away like a misunderstanding? So instead, I retreated. I still texted. Just the polite kind, hope you're both doing well, or let me know if you need anything. Shelby replied with brief messages that sounded more like autoresponses than human conversation. Thanks, we're good. Appreciate it. Sometimes, she didn't reply at all. Just left it on read. And yet, I kept writing. I kept sending little packages in the mail, organic baby lotion, a copy of Goodnight Moon, some burp cloths I stitched myself. I didn't expect a parade of gratitude. But I suppose I did expect something. A photo. A call. Even just the lotion's nice. Nothing. I told myself she was busy. That's what everyone says about new moms. And maybe she was. But I was a mother once too. I remembered how exhausting it was, how fragile everything felt. But I also remembered how I clung to those who showed up without being asked. Still, I kept it cordial. Kind. Never passive-aggressive, never cold. I made a point of being easy. Someone they could say she's sweet about, even if they didn't mean it. It became its own performance, one I didn't quite know how to stop. But underneath the smiling and the silence, something inside me felt like it was bruising. Not a sharp pain. Just this steady, spreading ache that started in my chest and leaked into everything. Sometimes I'd catch myself in the mirror and think, maybe Shelby's right. Maybe I am too much. Too old-fashioned. Too soft. Maybe my way of loving doesn't translate anymore. And the more I tried to make room for them, the smaller I became in my own life. I started going into town more often, mostly to distract myself. That's how I ended up at Knot Needle, a little yarn shop tucked between a used bookstore and a chiropractor's office off Maple Street. I hadn't been there in years. But the wooden sign was still the same, a little crooked from the wind, and the smell inside, warm wool and lavender soap, brought me back like a song. Delilah O'Keefe ran the place. We'd gone to high school together, though we'd lost touch when we both got married and life sped up. She hadn't changed much. Her hair was still a little wild, her lipstick always slightly smudged like she never stayed still long enough for it to set. When she saw me walk in with my tote bag full of half-started baby blankets and yarn that had lost its joy, she raised an eyebrow. Well, if it isn't Marlene Grove, she said, arms crossed, voice full of heat. What are you doing with all that sadness in your hands? I laughed, a little embarrassed. Trying to keep busy, I guess. She led me to a corner booth in the back where ladies used to gather for afternoon knitting circles. These days it was quieter, mostly just Delilah and her radio humming Patsy Cline in the background. She watched me unpack the soft pastel yarn and a cardigan I never finished. Then, without preamble, she said, "So, did she even thank you?" I blinked. Who? She gave me a look that cut through all my politeness. Your daughter-in-law? For any of this? I hesitated. She's busy. Delilah leaned forward on her elbows. Listen. I've been that woman. Smiling through being dismissed. Knitting love into things no one wants. And I'm telling you, it doesn't earn you anything but more silence. I didn't say anything. But something inside me cracked just a little. Because she wasn't wrong. I'd been showing up over and over, hoping that maybe if I folded myself small enough, I'd be allowed in. Then Delilah told me her story. How her son's wife once gave her a schedule of when she could visit, so it didn't interfere with their routines. How she accepted it for a year. And how it wasn't until she stopped saying yes to everything that they started treating her like a person again, not a piece of furniture. You know what changed, she said. Not them. Me. I sat in that yarn shop for over an hour that day. We didn't knit. We just talked. Or rather, she talked and I listened, which is what I hadn't let myself do in a long while. Really listen. To my own resentment. To my own loneliness. This wasn't about being left out of a party. It was about feeling like I no longer mattered in the family I helped build. I went home that day with nothing new in my bag, but something different in my chest. Not anger exactly. Just the faint outline of a boundary I hadn't drawn yet. But would. It was nearly 10 o'clock when the phone rang. I was already in bed, one of those nights when the house felt bigger than usual, and the television had stopped making sense hours ago. I had just turned off the lamp when the screen of my cell lit up on the nightstand. Shelby. I stared at it for a second. Her name didn't show up often. I answered, trying to sound more awake than I felt. Hello? There was a pause, like she hadn't expected me to pick up so fast. Then came her voice, tight, shaky, almost unfamiliar. Hi, Marlene. Hi. I hope I'm not waking you. You're fine. Is everything okay? Another pause. Hi. I wouldn't be calling this late unless it was important. I didn't really want to. Jonah and I have been talking, and we're kind of stuck. The word hung there, limp and vague. Stuck? I asked gently. Her breath caught on the other end. Daycare. We can't afford it. Not full time. Not with what it costs around here. It's almost $2,000 a month, and that's with a wait list. We thought maybe you could help. With the baby. There it was. The ask. Not framed as a favor. Not softened with warmth. Just need, dropped into my lap like a bill overdue. I sat up in bed. How often are you thinking? I asked. Monday through Friday. Work hours. 8 to 5. Or 6, depending. I looked around my bedroom as if it might offer me an answer. The light from the hallway poured in through the cracked door, stretching over the floorboards like a reminder of how quiet this house had become. I glanced at the bookshelf, the rocking chair in the corner, the folded cardigan I'd left on the arm of the chair. And something inside me pulled tight, not because she was asking, but because it had taken this kind of crisis for her to. Did Jonah suggest calling me? I asked. There was silence. Then, very softly, she said, he said you'd probably say yes. Probably. It didn't sound like faith. It sounded like assumption. Like I was a vending machine they could press anytime life got hard. I held the phone a little tighter. And what do you think, Shelby? Do you think I'll say yes? Her voice dropped. I don't know. I could hear it then, the panic she was trying to cover. The tension in her breath. And I understood something important in that moment. She wasn't asking because she saw me. She was asking because she had run out of other options. And yet, a part of me still wanted to say yes. That part of me that had waited on the porch with a gift bag and a hopeful heart. That part of me that kept believing love meant showing up, no matter how often you were told to stay outside. But something had shifted in me since then. Quietly. Like a tide you don't notice rising until your shoes are wet. "I'll think about it," I said. "But I'd like to talk in person. Not over the phone." Shelby exhaled, a sound too close to relief. "Okay. Sure. Just, let us know soon." "Of course." We hung up, and I stayed there in the dark for a long while. The clock ticked. The house settled. A car passed by outside, headlights sliding across my window like ghosts that didn't stop. I thought about what that phone call meant. Not just the words, but the rhythm beneath them. Shelby didn't call because she missed me. She didn't call because she wanted to reconnect. She called because she needed childcare, and I was cheaper than the alternatives. I didn't blame her for needing help, but I couldn't help but feel the hollowness behind the ask. There was a time when I thought this house would be full of family. I'd pictured birthdays here. Sleepovers. High chairs and toys left out. I imagined being the kind of grandma who knew what cereal her grandchild liked, who had sippy cups in every cupboard and coloring books tucked behind the cushions. But instead, here I was, sitting in a house so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the next room. Waiting to be useful. Not wanted. Just convenient. It's a strange kind of loneliness, to still love people who only remember you when it's hard. I pulled the cardigan off the chair, wrapped it around myself, and walked to the kitchen. I put on the kettle, though I wasn't really thirsty. I just needed something warm to hold. There's a difference, I've learned, between being needed and being valued. One fills your calendar. The other fills your soul. I stood there in the kitchen, bathed in the dim yellow light, and whispered out loud to no one, maybe it's time they learn the difference, too. The morning before our meeting, I went out to the car to clean it up a bit. It had been a while since I gave it a proper tidy, and I figured if I was going to sit across from my son and daughter-in-law and have a conversation that might break something, I didn't want to be distracted by coffee stains and receipts in the cup holder. I popped the trunk to grab some paper towels, and that's when I saw it. The gift bag. Still there. Folded neatly, untouched, the tissue paper slightly crinkled but otherwise perfect. Pale yellow ribbon still tied around the handle. I pulled it out slowly, like it might collapse in my hands. And for a second, it felt like it did. That was the blanket I had knit weeks ago. The one I carried to the baby shower I wasn't invited to. The one that never made it inside. Apparently, in my flustered rush to leave, I'd only handed off the book and kept the blanket tucked underneath in the car. I stood there in my driveway, holding that bag like it was evidence from a crime scene. And maybe it was. Not of their wrongdoing, but of my own quiet hope. I had brought it that day believing that love, when wrapped in yarn and given with both hands, would be enough to pull me closer. That it would matter. It hadn't. I brought the bag inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it while the kettle boiled. When the tea was steeping, I called Delilah. "You free to talk?" I asked. She didn't say hello or ask what it was about. She just said, "Always." 10 minutes later, I was in the back corner of Knot Needle with a cup of peppermint tea and that baby blanket resting beside me like an uninvited guest. I told her everything, the phone call, the daycare request, Shelby's voice cracking at the edges. Delilah listened, arms folded, nodding like she'd already seen this story play out 100 times. When I finished, she didn't offer comfort. She asked one question. "Do you want to help your grandbaby, or do you want to be respected?" I didn't answer right away. She leaned in a little. "Because the two aren't always bundled together. You can give all the help in the world and still be invisible. And I know you, Marlene. You don't want to be the unpaid nanny. You want to be seen. I sipped my tea, eyes burning. I don't blame the baby. He didn't ask for any of this. I know. But you're not protecting him by disappearing yourself. Her words sat in my chest like a stone. Not cruel. Just true. I drove home with a plan slowly forming. A plan I didn't like, but needed. I wasn't going to say no. But I also wasn't going to say yes like it didn't cost me anything. That night, I pulled out one of my old notebooks. The kind I used to keep when Jonah was little, filled with grocery lists and appointment reminders and notes about which foods made him sick. On a clean page, I started writing down every small thing I'd done since the pregnancy. Every offer I'd made. Every call I'd left unanswered. Every moment I bit my tongue. I wrote because I needed to remember it too. I needed to see it in ink, not as a list of grievances, but as proof that I'd shown up. That I'd tried. Then I called Maple Bench, the little coffee shop where Jonah used to take me for Mother's Day brunch back when he still thought I hung the moon, and made a reservation for Sunday morning. I texted both of them. I'd like to meet at Maple Bench this Sunday to talk about the baby. My treat. Shelby replied with a thumbs up emoji. Jonah just wrote, okay. That night, I took the gift bag from the kitchen table, untied the ribbon, and unfolded the blanket. I held it in my lap while I watched TV, fingers running along the stitches I had made with so much care. And I whispered to it, not like a crazy person, but like a woman who needed to say the truth out loud, I won't let them pretend I don't matter. Not again. I got to Maple Bench 20 minutes early. The place hadn't changed much, same chalkboard menu, same uneven floor tiles that creaked under your step, same smell of cinnamon scones and dark roast coffee. It was the kind of cafe that felt like a real place, not something curated for Instagram. I picked a table by the window. From there, I could watch the parking lot without looking like I was waiting. I brought my little green notebook, the one I'd filled with notes about every offer, every quiet effort, every moment I bit my tongue. I also carried a soft canvas bag with the baby things I'd made, booties, mittens, and that same blanket from the car. Still unused. Still perfect. I ordered a chamomile tea, even though I wasn't sure I'd taste it. My hands felt a little unsteady, so I kept them folded in my lap. I didn't want to fidget. I didn't want to give myself away too soon. At 10:02, Jonah and Shelby walked in. Shelby looked put together as always, hair smooth, makeup light but deliberate. Jonah looked tired. He gave me a small, tense smile as they slid into the booth across from me. Thanks for meeting, he said, voice low. Shelby nodded politely. We appreciate your time. They sounded like clients in a conference room. I didn't waste it on pleasantries. I know you're both exhausted, I said. Being new parents is overwhelming. I remember it well. The lack of sleep. The way everything feels urgent. You're doing a lot. And I understand that. Shelby exhaled, visibly relaxing. I could almost see it on her face, the assumption that I was going to make this easy. But I wasn't here to be easy. I reached into my tote and placed the notebook on the table. Opened it slowly. Then I laid out the little blanket, folded carefully, beside it. I brought this to your baby shower, I said, looking at Shelby. I was never sure if you got it. Turns out, I forgot it in the car. It's been in my trunk for over a month. She opened her mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to change the subject, but I kept going. I started knitting that the day Jonah called to tell me you were pregnant. I imagined wrapping your baby in something made by hand. I thought it would be something you'd want. Jonah glanced at the blanket. Shelby didn't. I flipped through the notebook. Here's a list of things I offered: childcare, help around the house, baby supplies. Some of them were acknowledged. Most were not. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I didn't raise my voice. But the silence that settled over the table was heavier than if I had screamed. I'm not here to scold you, I said, looking from Shelby to Jonah. I'm here because something has to change. Shelby straightened in her seat. We're just asking for help, Marlene. And I might give it, I said quietly. But let me be clear, if I say yes, it won't be the same as before. It won't be with my voice tucked into the corners while I get treated like I don't belong. Jonah shifted. We didn't mean to make you feel that way. I nodded slowly. I know. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Shelby looked at me for the first time, really looked. There was something in her eyes, confusion, maybe, or defensiveness, but not cruelty. And I wasn't trying to punish her. I just needed her to know I existed. I've spent the last few years making myself smaller, I said. Trying not to be a burden. Trying not to make waves. But that's not the kind of grandmother I want to be. And it's not the kind of mother I want to keep being, either. Shelby's lips parted slightly. She looked over at Jonah, who was staring down at the table. If I'm going to be in your child's life, I said, it has to be as someone who is respected. Not someone who gets called when the options run out. I folded the notebook shut and rested my hands on top of it. You don't have to decide today. But I needed to say this out loud, because I've spent too long saying it only to myself. No one spoke for a moment. I watched people come and go outside the window, couples with strollers, two women laughing over iced lattes. Normal life carrying on. Shelby finally said, softly, we didn't realize how much you were holding in. I know, I replied. But now you do. Shelby didn't say anything right away after I finished. Her eyes flicked down to the table, then back to me, like she was deciding which version of herself to bring to this conversation. The pleasant daughter-in-law, or the one who didn't appreciate being confronted. She chose the latter. I didn't think you'd start keeping score, Marlene, she said quietly, almost with a shrug. It's your grandchild. I didn't think you'd put conditions on helping. Her tone was measured, polite even, but there was an edge underneath. Like I'd broken some unspoken rule about how mothers-in-law are supposed to behave. I didn't flinch. He is my grandchild. And that's exactly why I won't say yes to something that makes me feel invisible. Again. Shelby's expression tightened. It's not like we're asking you to do something outrageous. It's childcare. Families do that. I took a deep breath, steadying my hands on the rim of my tea mug. Yes. Families help. But families also respect each other. I've been offering help for months, and you barely acknowledged I existed. Now that you need something, you want me 5 days a week, full-time, no questions asked. That's not family. That's unpaid labor. Jonah cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. Shelby, she's right. Mom has always tried to be involved, even when we didn't make it easy. Shelby turned to him, surprised. You're taking her side? It's not about sides, he said, his voice quiet but firmer than I'd heard in a long time. I think we've made her feel like a backup plan. That's not fair. That was the moment something shifted. Not with Shelby, her jaw was still set, but with Jonah. My son. The boy I raised. I saw it in his face, the flicker of recognition. The slow understanding that all the love in the world doesn't matter if you're treated like an afterthought. Shelby let out a breath through her nose, like she'd been holding it. We've been overwhelmed. You don't know what it's been like, everything falling on us at once. We're drowning, Marlene. I believe you, I said gently. I've been there. But drowning doesn't give you permission to pull someone else under. She looked at me, then looked away. If you don't help, I don't know what we're going to do. I held her gaze. You've been living like I don't exist. But now, suddenly, I'm the lifeline. You can't have it both ways. There was a beat of silence. The air in the little cafe seemed to settle. The clinking of forks and background chatter faded into a kind of stillness around our table. And then I said it, the part one had rehearsed a dozen times in my head. I will help, I said. But here are my terms. Shelby looked up again, eyebrows raised. I'll take care of him 3 days a week, Tuesday through Thursday. From 9 to 4. I need advance notice for any changes, and I won't be available last minute. I won't be guilt into extra hours or weekends. I need time for myself, too. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. And while I'm caring for him, I get to be a grandmother. That means I'm not just following instructions, I'm participating. I'll feed him how I believe is best. I'll take him places. I'll read to him, even if it's not on your list of Montessori-approved books. I raised a good man. I trust my instincts. Jonah nodded slowly. That sounds fair. Shelby looked between us, something unreadable in her expression. She wasn't used to me drawing lines. She'd expected softness, compliance, maybe even desperation. What she got instead was clarity. No pay, she asked, almost challenging. I didn't ask for pay, I said. I asked for respect. Another pause. Finally, she nodded. Okay. If you're sure. I nodded back. I've never been more sure. She glanced at the blanket again, still folded on the table beside the notebook. For the first time, her hand reached toward it, hesitant, almost unsure. It's beautiful, she said. Quiet. Honest. I gave her a small smile. He'll look good in it. And just like that, we'd reached something new. Not peace. Not forgiveness. But a place to begin again, with boundaries this time. With truth. Shelby didn't say another word after I laid out the terms. She sat still, eyes fixed on a spot just to the left of the sugar jar, fingers resting neatly in her lap like she was bracing for a wave that never quite came. No protests. No sarcasm. No dramatic exit. Just silence. For once, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. Heavy, but clean. Like something had cracked, not in a destructive way, but the kind that lets air in after being sealed up too long. Jonah nodded slowly, and I watched something settle in his shoulders, like he'd stopped holding his breath. He reached across the table, rested his hand gently on mine. We accept, he said. And thank you, Mom, for saying it. For not letting it slide again. I nodded. Just once. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved, either. What I felt was steady. Like I had planted both feet in my own skin for the first time in a long while. And I had no intention of moving. I reached into my bag and pulled out the unfinished sweater, cream yarn, soft, delicate, the right size for a baby boy heading into his first fall. I held it up for a moment, looked at the stitches, then gently folded it over my forearm. I'll finish this, I said. Not because I want anyone's approval. But because I love that child. That part hasn't changed. I glanced at Shelby. She looked up briefly, then back down again. I didn't press. I'd said what I came to say. We wrapped up the meeting like we were coming out of a different kind of contract, not with paperwork, but with a quiet understanding. Jonah insisted on paying the bill, which I let him. Small gesture. Big shift. As we stood to leave, I took one more look around the cafe. The clink of coffee cups, the laughter from a nearby booth, the swirl of wind through the open front door. Life, happening. Normal, gentle, unspectacular life. Outside, the sun had moved behind the clouds, and a soft breeze picked up. It wasn't cold, but it was enough to tug at my sleeves and remind me what season we were in. Change was coming. Not loud or fast. But it was here. Jonah gave me a long hug, longer than usual. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. I didn't say anything back, just patted his shoulder and let that be enough. Shelby offered a quiet "Goodbye, Marlene," before walking toward their car. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. For now, that was all I needed. I stood there in the parking lot for a moment longer, watching them drive off. My fingers gripped the sweater gently, like it might blow away otherwise. And I turned back to the cafe, just for a second. Not because I had forgotten something, but because I needed to be sure. Sure that I was done standing on the outside of things. Done sitting quietly while decisions got made around me. Done playing the role of the agreeable, helpful woman who smiled through being sidelined. I wasn't walking away from them, I was walking toward myself. And that sweater? I finished it that week. Each stitch, a promise: I will show up for this child, not as a shadow, but as someone with a place at the table. With a chair that has my name on it, not because I demanded it, but because I finally stopped asking for permission to belong. I used to think love meant being needed. Now, I think it means being known. And as I stepped off the curb and headed toward my car, the words came to me, not like a declaration, but like truth. I've spent enough time sitting on the sidelines. Now, I want a seat, right in the middle, of my own family. Wednesday morning started like any other, but somehow everything felt new. The light that streamed through the kitchen window seemed warmer, steadier. I turned on the coffee maker, not rushing the process, just listening to the quiet drip and hum of it filling the carafe. From the living room, I heard soft cooing and the squeak of a toy being squeezed. I smiled to myself. My grandson was lying on the quilt I'd laid out, tugging at the ear of a stuffed bear I had sewn from an old flannel shirt. His little legs kicked in rhythm, his cheeks pink with excitement over nothing at all. At exactly 8 o'clock, Shelby had knocked on the door. She didn't barge in, didn't send a rush text from the car. She stood there, holding the baby, diaper bag packed neatly, and said, "Good morning, Marlene." "Thank you." That was it. No overly sweet performance. No tight smile. Just, "Thank you." I nodded and took the baby from her arms. She lingered for a moment, just long enough to ask if he'd napped well yesterday and if I had enough bottles thawed. I assured her I did. "See you at 4, she said, and left. No chaos. No last-minute requests. No sense that I was a backup plan. This was different. I sat down at the kitchen table with my coffee and just listened, to the baby gurgling, to the tick of the wall clock, to my own breath. Peaceful. Not perfect, but peaceful. Later that day, during nap time, I looked around the house and noticed how it had started to shift. There was a playpen in the corner, a basket of board books by the armchair. A magnet on the fridge with the emergency contact numbers Shelby had typed up for me. Things had changed, not dramatically, but honestly. I wasn't just helping out. I was part of the structure. On terms that didn't leave me feeling small. Shelby didn't suddenly turn into a warm and fuzzy person, but she was present now. Respectful. And maybe even a little grateful, though she didn't always say it out loud. She asked my opinion on sleep schedules. She left space in conversations. And most of all, she let go of the idea that everything had to be done her way. We started having little family check-ins every Sunday afternoon. Just the three of us, me, Jonah, and Shelby, going over the week. Who's dropping off when? How the baby's doing? If anything needs adjusting. No one called the shots. We shared them. And Jonah, he changed in his own way. Quietly. One evening, he called just to ask how my day had been. No agenda. Just to talk. I should have seen it sooner, he said. How alone you must have felt. I didn't rub it in. I didn't say, yes, you should have. I just said, thank you for seeing it now. It was enough. One afternoon, after the baby had fallen asleep, I sat on the front steps with him nestled against my chest. He was warm, breathing in that slow, heavy way babies do when they trust the arms holding them completely. The sky was streaked with orange, and the trees were just starting to drop their leaves. I felt the softness of his blanket against my hands, one I had finally finished, not because I needed Shelby's approval, but because love, when it's real, doesn't ask to be noticed. His tiny fingers curled around my thumb, and I looked down at him with a heart that wasn't bursting, but full. Full in that quiet, sturdy way that doesn't need to be shown off. Just felt. In that moment, I didn't feel like a helper or an obligation. I felt like I belonged. Not because they finally made space, but because I claimed mine. I sat there until the light began to dim, rocking slowly, the breeze lifting strands of my hair. I didn't need applause. I didn't need a title. I just needed this. The weight of a child sleeping peacefully in my arms. The knowledge that I had not disappeared. And as I watched the last of the sunlight fold across the grass, I thought to myself, I don't need anyone to call me the perfect mother. I just need to know. I'm not standing outside the door anymore. You know, looking back now, over 70 years of life, motherhood, quiet sacrifices, and louder awakenings, I don't carry anger with me. What I carry is something steadier, a sense of place. A knowing. Not every story wraps itself with a bow. Sometimes, it's enough to say, I stayed true to myself. And that, I think, is its own kind of happy ending. Have you ever felt like you were standing outside your own life, waiting to be invited in? Maybe you're not alone in that. If this story spoke to something in you, something quiet, maybe long buried, I hope you'll join me again next time. We've got more stories to tell, you and I.